by transcendental meditation. I go there each night, but I always come back to myself long before daylight. All my exes live in Texas, and Texas is a place I'd really love to be. But all my exes live in Texas, therefore I reside in Tennessee. Some folks think I'm hiding, it's been rumored that I died, but I'm alive and well in Tennessee.
It was 1989, my thoughts were short, my hair was long, caught somewhere between a boy and man. She was 17 and she was far from in between. It was summertime in northern Michigan. Splashing through the sandbar, talking by the campfire. It's the simple things in life, like when and where. We didn't have no internet, but man, I never will forget the way the moonlight shined upon her hair. the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy. Lighten up while you still can. Don't even try to understand. Just find a place to make your stand and take it easy. Well, I'm standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona, and such a fine sight to see. It's a girl, my lord, in a flatbed Ford, slowing down to take a look at me. Come on, baby, don't say baby. I gotta know if your sweet love is gonna save me. We may lose and we may win, but we will never be here again. So open up, I'm climbing in. So take it easy. Running down the road, trying to loosen my load. Got a world of trouble on my mind. Looking for a lover who won't blow my cover. She's so hard to find. Take it easy. Take it easy. Don't let the sound of your own wheels make you crazy. Come on, baby, don't say maybe. I gotta know if your sweet love is gonna save me. Oh, we got it easy. We ought to take it easy.
Out in the West Texas town of El Paso, I fell in love with a Mexican girl. Nighttime would find me in Rose's Cantina. Music would play and Felina would whirl. Blacker than night were the eyes of Felina, wicked and evil while casting a spell.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tara Wood.
Wow. You know, I didn't know we were having our monthly meeting this month because of spring break and our big fundraising event coming up on May 3rd. But here we are, and our keynote speaker is going to be Governor Ron DeSantis. How about that? So, everyone, would you please stand? Again, we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, my name is Tara Wood, and I'm the chapter chair of Moms for Liberty Charleston County. We are moms, dads, grandparents, and concerned citizens who came together to fight for our fundamental rights as parents, to decide what is best for our children in education, medical care, and moral upbringing. We are the watchdogs of our school board. I started attending school board meetings over 2 years ago, and I have not stopped. And we have Moms for Liberty members that are at those same meetings every month. Moms for Liberty Charleston County made it our mission to flip the school board last year. We now have a 5-4 majority Moms for Liberty endorsed members on that board. However, now that there is a majority, we have so much work to do to clean up the mess that's in our schools. So there are 18 Moms for Liberty chapters in South Carolina, and there's almost 300 nationwide. And no matter what lies the media tells about us, we are not backing down, we will not be intimidated, and we are just getting started. So, my personal journey began about 6 years ago when my daughter came home. She was about 8 years old. And she came home from school one day, and she said, "Mommy, how do I know I'm a girl?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "How do I know I'm not supposed to be a boy?" So I was so concerned, but I just didn't think that she got that idea from school. And because this was before I was aware of the woke movement taking over K through 12 schools. So in that same year, she was given one of those surveys, the SEL surveys, social emotional learning surveys, and these are data mining our kids. These results are seen through an equity lens, and they're generating scores based on social justice. These surveys are the bloodline for continued funding for SEL curriculum and lessons. SEL is the Trojan horse that school boards can use to bring in critical race theory, ideology, gender identity, sexual orientation instruction, and social justice education. Every year, my daughter is exposed to inappropriate books and lessons. Last year, my daughter was asked by her teacher to give a verbal book report to the classroom on a book called I Am Jazz. You heard of that? There's a reality TV show about this person. So this book is a true transgender story about a little boy who took hormone blockers to become a little girl. And I'm going to tell you that this was an in-class lesson. The students were not asked to take their books home. So this is how some teachers can hide curriculum and lessons from parents. And it is happening. And so what does any of this have to do with teaching our kids to read, write, and do math? And why would adults want to normalize transgenderism, and even worse, encourage children to believe that they should change their sex to fix all of their problems? Dr. Paul McHugh, the former psychiatrist-in-chief of Johns Hopkins Hospital and its current Distinguished Service Professor of Psychiatry, said, quote, that transgenderism is a mental disorder that merits treatment, that sex change is biologically impossible, and that people who promote sexual reassignment surgery are collaborating with and promoting a mental disorder. While the Biden administration, Hollywood, major media, and our schools promote transgenderism as normal, quote, policymakers and media are doing no favors either to the public or to the transgendered by treating their confusions as a right in need of defending, rather than as a mental disorder that deserves understanding, treatment, and prevention. Governor Ron DeSantis understands that we are in an American culture war. He is leading the way and doing what it takes to save our country. He is a proven warrior of the conservative cause, and he has shown that he is willing to take on woke corporations and teachers' unions to protect our kids. Citizens of Florida tried for 3 years to pass a parental rights bill. It was Governor DeSantis that signed that bill. He also signed a bill last year limiting the way sexual orientation and gender identity can be discussed in schools, which critics have labeled Don't Say Gay Bill. This bill is also being imitated in South Carolina and other states. Governor DeSantis helped flip school boards throughout his state by endorsing conservative school board candidates. He recently met with the founders of Moms for Liberty to find out what else needs to be done to flip more school boards. He has already released his first list of school board candidates to flip in 2024, which is great, and there'll be more. So I had the pleasure of hearing Governor and First Lady DeSantis speak at the Moms for Liberty National Summit last summer in Tampa. They are loving parents to 3 young children, ages 6, 4, and 2, which is keeping them very busy. And matter of fact, the 2-year-old was the first baby born in the governor's mansion in over 50 years. And did you know that Casey DeSantis graduated from the College of Charleston? I know, it's amazing. And she has launched 4 major initiatives since Governor DeSantis was elected. She worked with the Department of Education to develop character education standards to be taught in Florida K through 12 schools. We will hear from First Lady DeSantis when she joins the governor on stage soon. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please help me welcome Florida's Governor, Ron DeSantis.
Governor is red, white, and blue. Oh, down and sweet Florida.
Hello. Hello, Charleston. Greetings from the free state of Florida. Yes, we're excited to have the First Lady of Florida here with us, College of Charleston grad. You know, when she was, when we met, I was in the Navy. She was working in Northeast Florida. She was a TV reporter, but her parents lived in Mount Pleasant, and so we would come and visit a lot. And I can tell you, if you go back, I was almost 20 years ago, every year we'd come back to visit, I could see more traffic on the roads, more people. I mean, honestly, it's similar to what we've seen in Florida over the years with people coming down here. I want to thank Moms for Liberty for all that you're doing here. We've got great groups in Florida, and your charge is very simple. If you can't make them see the light, make them feel the heat. And that's exactly what we're doing in all of our school board races. We're proud to talk about what we've been able to accomplish in the state of Florida, because we've really led the way on a lot of important issues, and we've produced results that have been the envy of the country. We are the fastest growing state in the United States. We're #1 for net in-migration. We're #1 for economic freedom. We're #1 for education freedom. We are #1 for parental involvement in education. We're #1 for public higher education. We have the second lowest tax and debt burdens in the country per capita, which is good. And famously, and as long as I'm around permanently, we have no state income tax. You guys should try that sometime. I'm telling you, it works well. And even though we have second lowest tax burden, no income tax, we're currently running the largest budget surplus in the history of the state of Florida. And so we're showing that these policies work. But of all those things that we did, and none of that would have been possible had we not stepped up to the plate, when COVID arrived on the scene, when the world went mad, when common sense suddenly became an uncommon virtue, it was Florida that stood as a refuge of sanity and a citadel of freedom, not just for the people of our state, for people throughout this country, and even people around the world who would descend on Florida to get away from all the madness. We refused to let our state descend into some type of Faucian dystopia where people's livelihoods were destroyed and their freedoms were curtailed. No, we chose freedom over Fauciism, and Florida's better off for that, but America is also better off for that, because if we had not stood up, Fauci would have won. And I think the good news about Florida, because sometimes there's a lot of pessimism about what's going on in the country, but I think what we show is that leadership matters and that boldness is rewarded. I got elected in 2018 governor by 32,000 votes out of over 8 million votes cast. It was less than 0.5%, victory margin. And in reality, that was nothing unusual for Florida. If you go back 2010, 12, 14, 16, and 18, the governor or presidential race in all of those years decided by 1 point. And we were kind of this closely divided swing state. If you don't win Florida, you can't win the whole thing nationally, and then fighting tooth and nail to win these offices for Republicans in Florida from governor on down. And so I go into this situation, and the state was, people thought it was a very delicate political bout. So I was told, be mindful of that. Don't do anything rash to upset that balance. Keep your head down. Don't rock the boat, because if you do that, it could end up tipping against us, and we may not do well in the future. And I understood the advice. Honestly, it was not crazy advice, but I rejected that advice. My view is I may have received 50% of the vote, but that entitled me to wield 100% of the executive power, and I intended to do that to the hilt to make sure that I was able to advance conservative policies in the state. And we would do that by leading based on conviction and principle and not consulting polls. So since I've been governor, we've not taken a single poll on any of these issues the entire time. Why would I want to be led by polls? A leader is not captive to poll results. A leader sets out a vision, executes the vision, and delivers results for people. And if you do that, it doesn't matter what the poll said initially. People will follow you. They will go in your direction. So we get ahead of things and we lead. We also just made it very clear, when you're going into executive position, you're the one that kind of makes decisions, and you got to make good decisions. You can set the agenda, and it's all very important. But you just doing that isn't enough. You got to have people in the administration who share the vision and who are going to put kind of the agenda ahead of their own agenda. And we just made it very clear at the beginning, because you can make the decisions. If they're going to act to frustrate your agenda, or they're not carrying out the agenda, then none of this ends up working out. So we said very clearly to people, if you're leaking, if you're bringing a different agenda into this administration, pack your bags right now. You're gone. We're not putting up with it. And the result is that we've had over 4 years, we don't leak to the media. There's no palace intrigue, very little, there's no drama about anything like behind the scenes. All it is just daily execution of the mission. And that's the reason why we've been able to get so much stuff done. We don't get diverted with all the nonsense that's out there. So we set that down on day one. We also said, I'm not going to be like some other Republicans. Some of these guys get into office and they're like potted plants. They don't do anything. And I'm thinking to myself, like, we need to go on offense. That's how you win. You go on offense. And so we said we're going on offense. We're going to make sure that we're getting ahead of issues. We're going to make sure we're raising, because look, anytime you make a decision as a leader, some people are going to like it and some people don't. So if your whole kind of ambition is to not upset anybody, well, one way to do that is just never do anything. Don't make tough decisions, and so you don't. That's not leadership. And so we said, we're going to be diving in. You can sometimes you could just, wait above everything, hope things die, and so you don't have to do it. We said, no, if we see something that needs to be addressed, we're going to lean in on it. And I remember sitting at the desk in the Capitol in Tallahassee the first day I was governor, and I just looked around the room. I thought for a minute, and I said, I don't know what SOB is going to succeed me in this office, but I do know this. They're not going to have very much to do, because I'm getting all the meat off the bone, and I'm going to leave them an empty desk. And we have done that already with just 4.5 years. And then the final thing is leadership. When you get elected to certain offices, some people lead, some people don't. But when you're an executive, when you're a governor, like, if you don't lead, you're not going to be effective. It's really about leadership more than anything. And leadership, at the end of the day, is about doing what's right when you have intense opposition and a lot of unfair criticism, but you're still willing to chart the proper course. You got to have the fortitude to stand alone if necessary, if that's what the circumstances called upon. And so we were tasked with kind of doing that when COVID hit, because I was taking stands that were totally contrary to what the media was saying, what the narrative was demanding, what you had a lot of people in really both political parties. And so we said, you know, and I was taking a beating politically for this, being called all sorts of things. But, you know, I looked at it and I said, I got into this office to represent the people of this state. Their jobs must be more important to me than trying to sacrifice my own. So if I have to take on incoming, if I have to take on water politically to be able to preserve the jobs of the people I represent, then so be it. That's what leadership calls for. And so that's what we did. And in reality, when you just do what's right, it's not always easy in the moment. It may not always even be apparent that it's going to pay off in the short term. But over the long term, people remember if you fought for them when it wasn't easy. Because it's easy to stand for the right things when everyone's doing it. So that's what we were able to show. And so fast forward to November of 2022, where we came in with this approach, having won by 32,000 votes. We then get reelected by over 1.5 million votes, highest percentage of the vote that any Republican governor candidate has ever had in the history of the state of Florida. We won 62% of Hispanic voters in Florida. We won women voters by 8 percentage points. We won independents by 18 percentage points. We were able to flip blue urban counties like Miami-Dade red, and in fact, we won Miami-Dade, not just won it, we won it by double digits, which no one thought was possible even a year ago. We also flipped counties like Palm Beach, and as was mentioned, you know, it's not just about you. Like, yes, I was the top of the ticket, and my race was important that we could continue our task, but you're really trying to build a team, and politics is a team effort. So we helped members of the legislature, and we were able to help earn super Republican majorities in the Florida legislature. So these are the biggest majorities we've ever had in state history as Republicans. We did get involved in school board races. We targeted 34 races, and we were able to win 29 conservative school board members, sending them to office throughout Florida. And that just required us to, you know, send money, send help, and all that, and actively get engaged in those races, but it's worth it. So now, statewide in Florida, there's not a single Democrat elected to statewide office for the first time since the Civil War period in Florida. There was a legacy, so when all the dust settled after the election, there was a corporate media outlet that ran an article with this headline, quote, "There's no plan, there's nothing. Florida Democrats in despair about the future." That is what you call winning if you're a Republican, let me tell you. So we're proud of that, but I think what it shows is, at the end of the day, you take a state like Florida that had been a swing state, and then you move it, you know, in a conservative direction. You know, why did that happen? You know, I'd like to think, you know, I don't think it's just because, like, you know, they just liked me. I think it was much more deep than that. I think it was about what we were standing for and the issues that we were parroting. And I think it shows that on key issues, the people, not just Republicans, the broader electorate side with us over the political left. I mean, just look at how we run our economy in Florida. Low debt, low taxation. New York State has almost 3 million fewer people than the state of Florida does now. And their budget is twice the size of the state of Florida's budget. And yet we have better roads, better infrastructure, higher performing schools. Where is all this money going to? You know, no one wants to be taxed, but when you're getting taxed and you see them frittering it away, you wonder why people flee that state and other similarly governed states. You also look at the federal government. Florida's economy is $1 trillion. Our debt is $20 billion. Compare our national government. The national debt is bigger by trillions than our entire American economy is. That is not a healthy fiscal picture. Look what they've done over the last few years. Massive amounts of borrowing and spending, trillions and trillions of dollars, the Federal Reserve printing trillions and trillions of dollars. What is the result of that going to be? Of course you're going to have inflation. I mean, this is just textbook economics. And so they have really driven I think a lot of working people into difficult economic circumstances. You know, Florida's economy, all the nuts and bolts at the state and our policy, you know, there's a lot of positive. But when you have prices and you have these other things because of what's going on in Washington, that makes it much more difficult with people. So the average person knows the Florida model is the way to go, not the Biden, Washington, D.C. model. They also side with us on the need for law and order and to oppose rioting and disorder. And it was really the Democratic Party and the political left that played fast and loose during the BLM riots in the summer of 2020. Tell you that, when I saw that going on in other states, we activated the National Guard in Florida. We had people ready to go. We weren't going to let anything happen to our folks. We've also rejected soft on crime policies. We've actually passed legislation prohibiting local governments from defunding law enforcement. And I'm the only elected official in the country that's actually removed a Soros-funded DA from office, which we did. They side with us by protecting people from the left's medical authoritarianism. And I can tell you, when they were doing the Fauci policies, you know, we had to step in and not just make sure Florida was doing good as a state, we had to overrule local governments who were trying to get in people's business about masking and about lockdowns. And we said, you can't do that if you're a county. And we were able to really protect a lot of people. And then when they wanted people to lose their job based on not taking an mRNA shot, we enacted protection so that in Florida, nobody has to choose between a job they need and a shot they don't want. We were the first state in the country to ban vaccine passports because you should be able to participate in society without having to show medical papers. And we were also the first state in the country to prohibit any COVID shot mandates for school children. That is not something that can be mandated. People also side with us on wanting our school system to be about educating kids, not indoctrinating kids. We in Florida stand for the rights of parents to be involved in the education and upbringing of their kids. We believe that it's important that the education stay focused on the nuts and bolts. That's why we've done things like ban critical race theory in our K through 12 schools. We're not going to use your tax dollars to teach kids to hate our country or to hate each other. That's unacceptable. We've also made sure parents have the ability to inspect the curriculum so you know what's being taught in your kid's school, and you can object if something is not appropriate or if it violates state standards. And what the left and the media will try to say is if there's a book in school that a parent objects to that says has pornographic images in it, that somehow that's, quote, banning the book. No, the adults can do, but does that belong in a school library with elementary and middle school kids? You know, of course not. I actually did an event on this in Florida. It was called Exposing the Book Ban Hoax. And before we had people speak, I did a video that just showed the books that were at issue and what the parents are objecting to. The local news had to cut their broadcast feeds because it was too graphic. Well, if it's too graphic for the 6 o'clock news, why is it okay for a 6-year-old kid? I mean, give me a break. We have drawn a line in the sand and said, we want to teach our kids, and look, the education stuff's important to me because I know how important it is to our state, I know how important it is to our country, but it also is important to me because my wife and I have a 6, 5, and 3-year-old kids at home. So we're looking at it through the lens of parents ourselves, and we just believe that parents should be able to send their kid to school, have them watch cartoons, just be kids, without having some agenda shoved down their throats all the time. So gender ideology has no place in our K through 12 school system, and we've made that very, very clear. It is wrong for a teacher to tell a student that they may have been born in the wrong body or that their gender is a choice. And so we don't let that happen in Florida, and if Disney objects to that, well, so be it. We're going to do what's right. We're also making sure that higher education in Florida reflects the values of the people of our state. Somewhere along the line, it became normal that a university is used to impose an ideological agenda, to foment political activism, and to be agents for quote-unquote social justice. That is not what a university should be doing, and that's not the traditional mission of the university. So in Florida, we're remooring that so that the purpose of our higher education system is the search for truth, is academic rigor, and he's giving students the foundation so they can think for themselves and be citizens of our republic. And so we will be signing legislation within the next 6 weeks, eliminating so-called DEI programs from all public universities. They say it stands for diversity, equity, inclusion. In reality, what it is a Trojan horse to impose left-wing ideology on the student body using the administrative apparatus of the university to do so. We think DEI, as it's practice, better stands for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public universities. And people get this. You know, our parents, they just want their kids to be treated based on merit and achievement. And when they see this DEI stuff and they see all the social engineering going on, this is not just conservative parents that object to that. It's wrong to be using this type of identity politics in that way. The people also side with us on demanding strong borders and upholding the rule of law. They do not like seeing open borders and chaos like we've seen, but you have millions of illegal aliens that have poured in over the last several years. You have criminal aliens coming in, you have people on the terror watch list, and we have record amounts of fentanyl that are coming into our country. The media likes to say, oh, well, what does Florida care? They're not a border state. I can tell you the stuff is coming in every single community in our country. We have more overdoses now than we've ever had in recent times, and the huge percentage of that is because of fentanyl. It used to be kids may make some stupid decisions, but they wouldn't die as a result. They take some substance that's laced with fentanyl, they could die just as a result of one bad decision. So we see mothers all too frequently that have lost children as a result of fentanyl overdose, and I think that a lot of people don't want to do anything about it. Like in Florida, we've sent people to the border to help Texas, some of our law enforcement and National Guard. We've banned sanctuary cities in the state of Florida. We work on our maritime interdictions because we do have a big maritime border, and they'll try to send boats from Haiti or Cuba or some of these places. It's the Coast Guard's job to interdict, but Biden doesn't give them enough resources to do it. So boats were getting through. So I mobilized the state's maritime assets. We're now filling the gap, and we've been able to repatriate over 11,000 illegals since August alone back to Haiti and back to other countries in the Caribbean. And all that gets ignored. In fact, the only time I've ever seen the national media get involved in terms of caring about the border was when 50 illegals showed up to Martha's Vineyard. That's the only time I saw them get upset about it. We also, part of what you need to do is the border's too big. Some say, oh, let's do some more Border Patrol agents, all that. Look, you need a wall to be built along the southern border because you can't do it with just manpower. And I think it needs to be done. And all I can say is this, we had a major hurricane come through Florida last September, and it did a lot of damage. One of the things it did, it knocked out a bridge going from the mainland to Pine Island, and it severed the Sanibel Causeway in 3 different areas. And those are not state bridges, they're not state roads, but, and the local governments were telling the residents it's going to be 6 months before you have access to be able to get back and forth on these islands. And so they came to me because they're like, our islands will be dead if that happens, if it takes 6 months. Can you help us? I'm like, all right, I'll help. So we took over the job. I got my guys together and I said, listen, no bureaucracy, no red tape, and no excuses. Let's just get this done. So we accepted the job to do Pine Island, which they said would take 6 months. We were able to rebuild in 3 days. And then Sanibel Causeway took us 2 weeks after that to be able to fix it in 3 places. And so I only raised that because those guys I used in Florida, I will send to the southern border to build. Just tell me, come on, Joe, send us in. Let's do it. Let's get it done. The people also side with us on wanting an economy where businesses focus on their core mission of providing whatever service or whatever they're doing in the economy and not getting mired into woke political activism. And you see it time and time again. Sometimes it's a one-off, like this ridiculous thing with Bud Light by trying to push the transgenderism. But what they're doing is, these are corporations, mostly very wealthy, powerful corporations, and they're trying to leverage their economic power to change our country, to change society, to change policy. Things like ESG, environment, social governance, what they're trying to do is pursue a left-wing agenda. They're against domestic energy production. They're against Second Amendment rights. They're against all these other things. And here's the thing. When you're talking about changing policy or changing the country that way, we have a constitutional way to do that. I mean, you run elections and you can put people to implement policy. They don't want to go through that because they know their policies would never be able to pass muster at the ballot box. So what they're trying to do is really do an end run around the constitutional system, use their economic power to impose these policies outside the normal system, and guess what? We don't have any recourse at that point. You're not going to be able to vote any of these people out of office. And so I think it's really important, if you want to preserve freedom in this country, we need to be fighting back against woke capital. We are doing that in Florida. We are eliminating ESG. We're providing protection for Floridians against woke banking. And, the Disney, we make sure that we'll keep them in their pen one way or another. So don't worry about that. So what is kind of the thread that goes through all of this? To me, the thread is this woke mind virus, this ideology that has really captured so many institutions throughout society. I think it's a form of cultural Marxism that seeks to divide not on class, but on the basis of identity politics. I think it's an attack on merit. I think it's an attack on achievement. I think that at the end of the day, it's a war on truth. And it's really important that our society be rooted in truth. And so if you tell me that somebody who's on the men's swim team for 3 years can just switch and do the women's team and somehow win the national championship, that's a fraud. That is not true. That is not the actual best women's swimmer in that thing. And so I think it's important that we reject the woke because the woke is asking us to reject the truth. And so in Florida, we recognize this as a threat across the board. Yes, we fight the woke in the legislative chambers, but we also fight the woke in the schools. We also fight the woke in the corporations. Our mantra is we do not ever surrender to the woke mob because we've made the state of Florida the place where woke goes to die. So the final thing I'll say before we bring out my better half and the star of the show, the First Lady, if you look at coming up on 2024, the stakes are really, really high. I think if the Dems sweep 2024 with the presidency, House, and Senate, they're not going to be pursuing an agenda that is going to be very appetizing for very many of us. I think what they would try to do is pack the U.S. Supreme Court. I think they try to abolish the Electoral College. I think they try to make Washington, D.C. a state. And I think they would try to impose ballot harvesting and eliminate voter ID nationwide. That's not an agenda that's speaking to the aspirations of the average American or the American family. They're worried about inflation. They're worried about crime. They're worried about education. They're worried about the core issues that so many people are concerned about. No, that's an agenda that's trying to render the conservative half of the country to be second-class citizens. They want to ensconce themselves in power, and they don't want us to have a credible voice in our own affairs. And I think back to a quote that President Reagan made: freedom is one generation away from extinction. It's not passed along in the bloodstream. It needs to be preserved. It needs to be fought for. And I do confess that when I used to hear that in the past, I thought it was a little bit over the top. I thought it was a little bit of hyperbole. After all, we're Americans. Isn't freedom just in our DNA? But I don't think you could have lived through the last 4 or 5 years and not be very concerned that freedom is on the ropes in the United States of America. And honestly, that is exactly what our founders believed would happen when they created this country. When they walked into the Constitutional Convention in 1787, they came armed with more knowledge than probably any group of men ever came about creating a new government. They studied the history of every republic and the history of mankind because they wanted to draw lessons from those experiences that they could apply to the new American ship of state. And what they found was there was really only one thing that united every republic that had been tried up until that point, and it was this: every single one of them had failed. And so it really fell to them, they believe, and I believe, to determine with the United States of America, could people really govern themselves? Could you have a society based on the idea that our rights come from God, not from government? Can you have a society based on the idea that we're governed by the rule of law, not by the rule of individual men? Or were we ever going to have mankind slumber under various forms of despotism? And so it was really the American experiment that would answer that question. But they knew that you could have the best Declaration of Independence in the world, you could have the best Constitution in the world. That just gives you the ticket to the dance. That's not enough to ensure a long-lasting free society. So when Benjamin Franklin left the convention, he was asked by a woman, "Dr. Franklin, what have you given us, a republic or a monarchy?" He said, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." They understood that it would require citizens generation after generation to stand up for freedom, to defend freedom, and if need be, to save freedom. And so while there's a lot of pessimism in the air for what's going on in Washington and our country, my belief is that decline is a choice. I think Florida shows that success is attainable, and I can tell you that freedom is something that's worth fighting for. So we will make sure we get it done right after we have the First Lady of Florida come join us on stage for a little bit of conversation. All right. Well, you're back in your old stomping grounds. Any reflections as a graduate of College of Charleston?
I remember, so I was born in Ohio, and I grew up there, and I remember the weather that we have outside is exactly like what I experienced when I visited South Carolina from Ohio when I was looking at colleges. I got off the plane, and it was 75 and sunny, and there were palm trees, and I'm like, you can go to college in places like this? And so I know I'm not the only Ohioan that has done this, who's come from Ohio down to South Carolina, but it was so great. So my parents were in Ohio, and they kept coming down to Charleston because they wanted to, visit me, but secretly they were falling in love with Charleston as well. So my dad ended up moving down here, working for MUSC, and then my sister, who is a C-17 Air Force pilot, and her husband, who is also a C-17 Air Force, they ended up moving down here. So the whole family was in Charleston for a good time. And I'll tell you what, as he has learned, you can never go hungry in Charleston. Some of the best restaurants, wherever you go, you just have to wait 4 months for a reservation, but once you schedule it, it's good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I had not spent much time prior to us meeting, and we were dating, and I was active duty in the Navy at the time, and we did have this was before, I think, the joint base. They were just in the process of doing what they have now. So I did come up for the Navy at one point, but then we would come up and we'd spend a lot of time, and really great area, and a really great state, and so we're happy to be back. Tell them, so we got elected 2018. We had a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old when we got into office. We had a third child while governor right at the beginning of COVID. So this is the first child born in the governor's mansion, I think, in like 60 years. So now we have 3. She fought and defeated breast cancer during the first term, which is not easy to do. Really served as an inspiration for a lot of people. And so you would think, like, being a mother, having to go through that, all these other things, that would be, that you'd have your hands full. But she's also done all these great initiatives as First Lady that have really made a difference throughout the state of Florida. So can you tell everybody about kind of what you've been able to do with Hope Florida, Pathway to Prosperity, and how you're not content to just let these government bureaucracies continue to fall in their face, but actually do something that would work for a change.
Right. And while you were saying that about the 6'5" and the 3-year-old, I just had a flashback, and I don't know if any of you were at the Tampa Moms for Liberty event down there, because I ended up doing an interview with Tina, but I thought it was going to be the most wonderful idea of why would you not invite the 5-year-old to come up and sit on your lap while you do the interview? It seemed like a great thing to do at the time. So anyway, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about it as having a minor flashback, and I was like, this is actually great. I can make subject and verb agree without having to worry about somebody who, by the way, during that interview was literally tugging on my shirt sleeve because she had to go to the bathroom. So moms, you get it. Okay. No, but listen, when the governor was first elected, 2018, 2019, I didn't want to be that proverbial potted plant that was mentioned a moment ago. You have the opportunity to be able to make a difference. And when you're given that opportunity, what do you do with it? And so I was very fortunate and very humbled as the First Lady of the state of Florida to go travel around and get a lot of key stakeholders together. And so I did that particularly in the child welfare sphere. So I went up into Northeast Florida, I went Northwest Florida, into Miami, we went to Orlando, and I noticed one thing in particular, everywhere that we went. There were wonderful people who were doing wonderful things, helping children and families, but they were all siloed. You had nonprofits over here, you had the faith community over here, you had local government over here, you had state government over here, and then you had the private sector over here doing great things, but there was very little communication and collaboration as it pertained to the best interests of people in need who were coming into the quote government. So we were looking at it, how do we reanalyze the situation? How can we help these people? Because I would also get questions when I was out doing press conferences or what have you, and people would often say, well, spending is X per capita on X issue, as if you spend more money, then that secretly means that you're going to have success in the issue. But it's like the law of diminishing returns. Sometimes when you're throwing more money at the problem, it just gets worse. You have to think differently about how we can help people. And one of the things that we wanted to do was, how do we corral and organize all of the support that we know that's there to be able to put people on a path, in this case, on a path to prosperity and economic self-sufficiency. So we launched officially in late 2021 something called Hope Florida, Pathway to Prosperity and Economic Self-Sufficiency. And what that is, those are people within our Department of Children and Families, and that's where we're helping single moms, primarily kids aging out of the foster care system, adoptive families, moms who are pregnant, battling substance abuse. They're coming into that agency, and we created Hope Navigators. Now, they have some interesting roles, one of which is to find all of the support at the community level, particularly the nonprofits. So instead of coming in, and what a lot of these folks would say, they say, yes, there's government assistance that can help you. Maybe there's a TANF grant, there's SNAP benefits. What they would do is look outside and beyond government to see what nonprofits are serving the particular needs of a single mom in need. And what's fascinating about what we've done is that if that nonprofit doesn't exist, we, for the first state in the nation, have really tapped into the faith-based community in a meaningful way. We utilize a technology called Care Portal. And what that is, these Hope Navigators can input into a system the needs of that single mom. So if she's calling in and talking to her Hope Navigator and she says, I'm having a hard time putting food on the table, I need bunk beds and mattresses, and I just can't make this work, can you help me? What that navigator will do will input that into a system, and our participating churches across the state will get a real-time alert in the form of an email or in an app, and they will see it, click it, and say, yes, we can do that. And they will deliver to her front doorstep beds, mattresses, and food. We have found that those inputs into the system only typically happen once, 80% of the time. But you're thinking, well, certainly the single mom has more needs than just bunk beds and mattresses. But what government has done has facilitated a connection now between the community, the faith-based organizations who were always doing wonderful things, but never knew that single mom was over there because they were in different silos. So we've taken down the silos, made the connection, and then government gets out of the way, because we want government to get out of the way. It's not a top-down approach. It's how can we facilitate and maximize the goodwill of great people. But it doesn't end there, because we're trying to get folks on a pathway to economic self-sufficiency, to live up to their God-given potential, and ultimately accomplish the American dream. And so we've tapped into, in particular, one of the things that he has done. He has invested with the legislature $70 million in the Fatherhood Initiative, because we have found one of the most wonderful things you can do for children, particularly of a single mom who's trying to work a job, who's trying to take care of her kids, who's trying to do a million things. If you can provide mentorship to her children, that is the biggest game changer. There's an agency in state government called the Department of Juvenile Justice, and we're very fortunate because we have kids who have gone through the system, they have gotten in trouble with the law, they have gone through very difficult beginnings, they've been abused and neglected, but they come through this Youth Ambassador program through DJJ because they've accomplished great things. They're the first kids in their family to go to school, to go to college, they're class presidents, they're running businesses, they're entrepreneurs, and I ask every single one of them the same question when I see them. I said, what was it that made you turn your life around? How did you get to the governor's mansion, given what you've gone through? And they all, in essence, give me the exact same answer. They said, someone at some point took an interest in my life and gave me value. And so what we've tapped into with his fatherhood initiative is our Hope Navigators then supply that single mom with all of the mentorship opportunities, saying, hey, at 2.5 miles down the road, there's a great program called Take a Kid Fishing. Would you like your son or daughter to be able to go out, learn how to fish? Or there's a business that's offering mentorship opportunity and facilitating it. Because again, you could have the greatest programs, the greatest resources in the world, but if you don't know that they exist, what good are they? So that goes back to the Hope Navigator. But again, on this pathway to economic self-sufficiency, so we've also tapped in the Department of Education. There's rapid credentialing, paid apprenticeships, vocational and technical opportunities, a lot of things that are paid for if you know that they're there, and how do you connect the dots? We've also brought in the private sector in a meaningful way, having them sign up to say, hey, listen, that single mom, she might not be able to work for you a traditional 9 to 5, but can you cut her some slack and do a 9 to 3 so that she can pick up her kids from school, she can be there to cook dinner for them, she can help them with their homework? They're like, yeah, we need some good people working for it. We'll facilitate that. And so again, that's a connection that we've been able to make using our navigators. And we've also tapped into things like the Department of Economic Opportunity, and where they have resume writing resources. There's all of these great resources that are there. What we're doing is connecting the dots, getting the heck out of the way, allowing people to live up to their God-given potential by giving them a helping hand, not giving them a top-down approach. And so we've been able to help about 5,000 people transition off of government assistance since we started this in late 2021. And that philosophical approach to government of how we are a convener and a collaborator is now applying to other agencies. We're doing this now for our veterans. We're doing this for the Agency for People with Unique Abilities and Disabilities. We're doing it for our great Elder Affairs Agency in the state of Florida. So there's a lot of great things that we're doing this, but harnessing the horsepower that is already there and providing opportunities for people to live up to their God-given potential. So that's one thing that I have been very privileged as the First Lady, not me, just the position, to be able to do.
Hear, hear.
But
So if you read this, and I don't know how many people have done, but I know that a lot of people have bought it because it was the #1 book in the country for a couple weeks, and I know they didn't like listing me at #1. Trust me. But one of the things that I talk about is we were dating in Northeast Florida. I was in the Navy. I got mobilized to go to Iraq, and so we did that. I was in Coronado, California. I was attached to SEAL Team 1, and then we went over to the sandbox, like Fallujah, Ramadi, all those places. So we came back, and I was like, okay, I'm going to propose when we come back. So that was on my agenda, and I was like, I just need to get through Iraq, and then we're going to get that done. So we did, and I just told her, I said, look, the wedding is really your thing. I was like, I'll just be along. So you kind of figure out what you want to do or whatnot. And so she started kind of, looking for different things and figuring out. I mean, we were in northeastern Florida area. Of course, she was from Ohio. I grew up in the Tampa Bay area. There was a lot of different possibilities. And so one day, she comes to me and says, I was talking to my parents, and they were interested in potentially doing the wedding at
Walt Disney World. I remember when this broke in the news, everybody thought it was so scandalous, like DeSantis got married at Disney. Like, yeah, it was great back then, but he had one caveat, though, because he was very gracious. He said, you go do what you want to do. This is your thing. Go for it. That was wonderful. And we grew up coming from Ohio, going to Disney. We had a lot of fun before they went woke, obviously. But there was one caveat. He said, you can do it, however.
no Mickey, Donald Duck, anybody at the wedding ceremony. They actually have a wedding chase. It's really nice, and everything worked out. It was traditional. In fact, you look at our wedding pictures, you wouldn't know that it was anything out of the ordinary. But you know, we're doing that, and then thinking about. So this is almost 15 years ago, and then no one was thinking like that somehow this would end up being something we would be involved with. Going toe to toe with them about gender ideology in kindergarten. Are you kidding me? I mean, it's just absurd, but that's just the way life works.
Well, it's so funny because people would say, oh, did you ever see, that the governor was going to be the governor? I'm like, when I first met him, he was a cute guy in the Navy. Like, I fell for the white uniform, right? Like, he was very handsome. He was like Tom Cruise. It was wonderful. So it's like, no. And so you look back, did you ever know that would be happening? No, I didn't think that. By the way, another question that I get all the time is, how did you guys meet? And people would think, oh, we met in college, and no, that did, because I went to college at Charleston, he was up in the Northeast. But it's funny, it's in the book, so that's his perspective, right? Because there's every two sides to every story with this one. So the story goes, so Northeast Florida, we were up there, and we both, well, he's a much better golfer than I am, but when I moved to Florida, ultimately for work, I felt like I needed to learn to play golf, right? Because it's like living in Colorado. You just need to learn how to ski. If I'm in Florida, that's just the thing that you do. You play golf. So I would go to the driving range, and I was not very good. I was hooking and shanking and all of this stuff. But one of those days I went out there, and this was a place that has gotten better over the years, but it was one of those places where you're hitting off of carpet. You can go get like a beer and a bucket of balls. And so somebody had graciously, or for whatever reason, maybe it wasn't gracious, they just ran out of time, had left a bucket of balls behind me, right? So if you're sitting in your little station, right, if you've ever been to a driving range, you got your station here, there's a station there, and then which I wasn't really looking at him, was right over here. Well, I kept looking over my shoulder because I wanted the bucket of balls. That was like gold on a driving range, right? So there was like $8. I mean, I needed a lot of help, so I kept looking over my shoulder. And so, he thought.
I thought she was looking at me. And so I went in and I started talking to her, and I offered her the rest of the balls, and we ended up going out and started dating, and everything was great. But I think, for the record, regardless of what I thought, she was looking over her shoulders, and she was eyeing the bucket of balls. She was not eyeing me. I mean, so that's just the reality.
That is true. But we got into a great conversation, and then the rest is history after that. We actually went out and had a beer at like Beef O'Brady's, which was so funny. I had never done that before, but I followed him in his car, and we went to Beef O'Brady's. Listen, when I'm out and about, and I talked about going to the Moms for Liberty event, and we did a lot for moms when we did the re-election for the governor. We actually signed up 1.1 million mamas for DeSantis, which is the largest mobilizations of moms and grandmoms in support of the governor. And one of the things I kept hearing over and over from moms, whether they were Republican, Independent, Democrat, it didn't matter. It was the woke ideology that was being thrust in front of their children without their consent. These are 5-year-old kids asking them, are you a boy or a girl? And no matter where, it was a bridge. Wherever I went in the state of Florida, it was a bridge too far. And so I know a lot of mamas would talk about how proud he stood up for schools, and he talked about the curriculum transparency, but I think this hits us both very hard because I hear a kid crying too, and I'm just thinking I have something that I need to do. It's like, we thought about bringing our kids, by the way, but then we thought if they're crawling out from underneath the stage, it wouldn't be a great thing, and they do travel with us.
Although next week, they are going to be and this was her idea, and I'm fine, but I mean, so we are actually doing a state trade mission overseas, and so the 6-year-old and the 5-year-old, not the 3-year-old, are going to be accompanying the First Lady and I, and we're going to end up in places like Israel, which is going to be very, very interesting to do that long trek. So we'll see how they behave.
Yes, it's one thing to we brought them to Ohio the other week, which was a lot of fun because that's where I grew up in Troy, Ohio, and so they were fine. But it's another thing when you're looking at the clock and literally we're flying out there. There is no Sunday. We lose all of Sunday. So as moms and dads, you're thinking schedule, right? What do you do when you're trying to keep a schedule but you lose an entire day on the calendar? And I think they're 16 hours or 15 or 14 hours. But so we don't know. It could be really good. It could be really bad. But you just just kind of do it because you're parents and you kind of roll with the punches a little bit. But back to the parents thing, so many people were appreciative of how you stood so strong for parental rights in education, standing up for good curriculum, ensuring that parents have the right to see that, ensuring that this woke ideology isn't shoved down their throats. And when you're sending kids off to college, making sure that they're getting an education and not an indoctrination. And that is something that I've heard from mamas and grandmamas in particular all across the country, really, in the state.
Yeah, our legislature's still in session, so we've got a lot of priorities, and we've been able to do a lot already, but we got some more stuff. One of the things we're doing, we're just nixing this whole idea of a teacher saying, choose your pronouns. Like, we never used to do that, so we're just not going to do it in Florida schools, and we're going to do normal school like everyone did for the whole history of our country until like 2 hours ago. But I think if you look, so with the curriculum transparency and what parents have found in some of these schools, and look, in fairness, in Florida, we have 67 counties, 45 of them didn't have any problems, but some of them did. When you look at some of this stuff, look, people will say like, oh, whatever books are in there should be fine. But it's like you make a choice to curate what's in a library, school library, a classroom, or something like that. Because if you had every book that's ever been printed, that would take up the whole bill. I mean, you couldn't do that. So you have to make choices by definition. So why you would make a choice for a book that would have like this pornographic content using our tax dollars, is just beyond me. And I think even like 5 or 10 years ago, everyone would have said that this is ridiculous, but there's obviously an element of our society who really wants to get this stuff in there and to get this in front of children. And I think it's a very, very bad trend. And I think in Florida, we're really the counterweight to that trend because we're empowering parents. We're making sure the laws are on their side and on the side of protecting kids. But some of the nonsense that's in there, you just wonder, what is going on with some of this stuff. So we're proud to have been to stand up against that and really against people that want to come, because the positions that you're taking for parents' rights and for students, a lot of the media will attack over that, and they really are supporting the left's agenda. I mean, we've seen corporate America, Disney being the most prominent, but there's others that have gotten involved in this. And so these fights, I think, are important. It's not just consumed to whatever happens in the legislature, because you have different institutions in society trying to advance the woke agenda as well. So Florida, we're full spectrum. We fight it everywhere we can, and making sure that we're protecting the freedom of our people. I don't think like you have a truly free state just because you have low taxes, low regulation, and no COVID restrictions if the left is able to impose their agenda through the education system, through the business sphere, and through all these others. A free state means you're protecting your people from the left's pathologies across the board, and that's really what we've done in Florida.
And I know we're short on time. The other thing that a lot of parents are very appreciative of, and you saw him take a stance not too long ago about this, but it was the women in sports, right? And so I grew up, I was a cross-country runner, I was a track, I did basketball, I played soccer when I was younger, I came to the College of Charleston to be on the equestrian team. So sports has been something that has been near and dear to our hearts. We wouldn't have met had it not been for sports. It was golf that brought us together. Now our kids are playing golf in the governor's residence and hitting balls into early 19th century French wallpaper, and it's fine. It's like, although I have like moments where it's the MasterCard commercial, where it's like, this costs this much and this costs that, and this is priceless, at the end of his 4-year term. We're wondering, are we going to get a bill for all of this? Neither here nor there. But sports are really important, and when, I just remember how much grit and determination and sweat and tears and perseverance and hard work that went into whatever craft it was, whatever sport that these girls were taking up. And he mentioned Leah Thomas a second ago. You have these women who have worked their entire lives to get to this point, to ultimately be a national champion or to be up on that podium. And, to have that being taken away from them is really sad. And so when they passed legislation to protect women in sports, I thought that was really great, especially as a mom of a 6-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old daughter who's a little spitfire, mind you, who is doing great in t-ball, by the way, except for, it's so funny, she'll hit the ball and then she'll run to third. And we're like, great, Mamie, go for it, And then she'll play in the dirt in the second inning, but it's okay, she'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue of the sports is an important issue because you're really making a conscious decision, if you allow this to happen, to take away opportunities from girls and from women athletes. I mean, that's just the reality. And we think that's wrong, but that's what's being done. And so it may be, you know, you're running track and field and you have a girl that comes in second who would have been first if they didn't have the transgender runner, and that's important. But it may be, you know, there may have been the seventh runner or the eighth or ninth who didn't even get into that race because of that. And so it does go on and on down the line. And I think it's really, really important. And you're basically telling these women athletes that, you know, their hard work, you know, is not necessarily going to pay off because some people in society are more worried about social engineering and ideology than providing a fair competition. But I think it's even larger than that, just in the sense that if we as a society say that a man that puts on a dress, dresses as a woman, and then, quote, identifies as a woman is actually a woman, that is not true, okay? And so if you're telling me that I have to accept that is a woman, you're asking me to be complicit in a lie, and that I will not do. And so part of this is about, are we going to have a society that's rooted in truth, or are we going to have a society that's unmoored from truth and is basically being swept away with different ideological currents? Because if you're saying that is a woman, you're putting ideology ahead of truth and reason. So yes, the opportunities as the father of two young girls who are both good athletic, important for sure. But it's a larger issue about what type of people we are, and I've never seen a society succeed when they've basically left the truth on the cutting room floor.
Well, I know we're short on time, but he had mentioned a little bit before about my battle and having overcome breast cancer. And I just want to say, though, from the bottom of my heart, because I got a lot of letters from across the country and a lot from right here in South Carolina of people who thought of me in the midst of all of this going on. And I cannot tell you how much that lifts your spirit when you're hearing stories of people saying, you know, I had stage 4, I had 3, 2, 1, I was able to beat it, stay strong, you can do it, stay strong. And that really helps you when you're going through tough times. You know, when I was diagnosed, it was a 4, 3, and 1 at the time. That's how old our babies were. And so just know that I appreciate everything that has come from this community, from people who have sent well wishes and those letters. And it actually inspired us so much that we started a cancer collaborative. And there's many facets to it. But one of the things is trying to put all of that forward-facing positivity to other people. Why should I be the only beneficiary of all these wonderful notes? I know other people would be praying for others who are battling it if they only knew that those folks were out there. So we started Cancer Connect, where people can put up their inspirational stories, they can post letters, they can talk about their journey, they can have their stories of how they were able to persevere and find the resources that they need to be able to get through tough times. And so just know how forever grateful I am for all of the prayers. I know a lot of people were praying for us.
Absolutely. And look, I'm the husband. People say I have to say this, but this is true. So we did a family photo, January of 2019, first day as governor, at the desk. I had Madison, too, on my lap. She stood next. I was sitting at the desk. She was next to me with Mason, who was only 9 months at the time. Fast forward 4 years. You know, we have another child. She goes through breast cancer, had COVID, a bunch of different issues that we just had to deal with, which was a topsy-turvy administration. I have Madison, who's then 6 on my lap. I've got Mamie, who didn't exist in 2019, who's 2 on the other lap, and then I've got Casey standing there with Mason, who was at the time 4. And so we put both pictures up in like an Instagram or one of these social media posts and say, 4 years later, whatever, and she was prettier in 2019 than she was in 2023 than she was in 2019. I almost messed that up. So how you go through all that 4 years and come out prettier in the end, I don't know, but it's true. And I challenge you to look at those photos. You will not come to any other conclusion.
I will say this. He has become a much better sweet talker in the last 4 years, if anything is true. No, but it's very kind.
Thank you all. God bless. If you have some books, we'll sign some books. And thank you all so much.
Take it to the bank. He don't care what brand of things at the White House.